friends and colleagues. Today I come to talk to you about an issue that concerns all interpreters, especially in this globalized economy and worldwide market. I am talking about how we get paid. Countries have different legislation, there are different systems to pay you, different currencies, different tax policies, and different immigration regulations that allow you to work or not in certain countries depending on where you're from and what passport you use or visa you hold. With all that said, I have to start by telling you that this is just me sharing my experience. Your experience might be very different, and in no way this is intended to be an oracle where I am advising you to do this or that. Before deciding what to do, you have to really know and come to terms with the type of service you provide, with the country where you live, the culture, and the legislation. And I would invite you to consult with an attorney and an accountant or tax expert in your country to determine what's the best way for you to go. But these are just some ideas that I think would be good. As you know, I am based in the United States, but I work both remotely and in person in some other nations around the world also. The first thing, therefore, that I want to talk to you about, and it's universal, and it doesn't matter whether we're talking about clients in your domestic market or international market, is how you should be paid. The eternal question, should you ask for all the money up front? Should you ask for an advance payment or down payment and then the rest after the service is provided? Or you should just wait and invoice your client after your services have concluded? Well, I would say that it depends more than anything else on the type of assignment and how well you do know that client. If it's an assignment with a client that you have never worked with before, I would have good discussions with the client and I would definitely ask for an advance payment. More than anything else, because I want to have at least all my expenses covered. Travel expenses, research expenses, any kind of expenses that you may have. Second, if it's a big event, or if the invoice is going to be very big, and I've never worked with a client, but it's a client that is well known and it's a serious and established client, I will probably go without requesting any advance payment. Of course, if the client is somebody that I have already established a relationship, we will go without any advance payment, but it's important for you to keep this in mind. Whenever you ask for an advance payment, it is important that you take into account the fact that you should get money to cover all of the expenses. Always expenses up front. Why? Because in the worst possible scenario, what will happen is that you break even, but at least you are not losing any money. Also, if you have overhead or you're retaining other support staff or other interpreters, you want to make sure that you have covered cancellation fees and all those things ahead of time. This is very important. Second point, sometimes we negotiate to perform our job alone and the other interpreters negotiate their own contracts. In that case, you just have to concern about your own payments. But sometimes when you're a consultant interpreting or you're acting or speaking on behalf of some of your colleagues, you have to come to terms with the fact that the client perhaps will ask just for one global invoice where you will invoice the client for the fees and expenses of all your colleagues that you brought to the case or to the assignment, or in some other situations, the client might request or you might ask for individual invoices where each interpreter will invoice the client. Sometimes this is a better situation, especially when not everybody is going to work the same number of days and provide the same type of service. But at any rate, you have to be aware of the fact that one way or the other, you have to assume the responsibility, and if you are invoicing for everybody, please make sure that you're fulfilling all the legal and fiscal obligations depending on who is working with you. And in these cases, it is always advisable, although sometimes when the client is well known, not necessary, but always advisable to request an advance payment with all the expenses covered up front, including the money that will cost the cancellation of the service of your other interpreter colleagues, and perhaps also the equipment provider if you are also taking care of that part of the deal. Next, The next thing that we have to come to terms also is what kind of payment we're going to accept. In my case, I live in the United States, and for the most part, my clients abroad don't have any problem with covering my fee in United States dollars. But there's every now and then a circumstance where that is not possible, maybe because it's a private entity from another country that hire you, or a foreign government. In those cases, I make a few exceptions, but it's always a stable currency. What I'm trying to say is that when I don't demand American money, US dollars, I can accept payment in Canadian dollars, British pounds, euros, or Japanese yen. But that's it. I will not take any other currency because of their volatility, because it is difficult to estimate how much that money will be worth by the time that you get the payment, or because of the inflation rate, or because of the currency exchange rate, or just because in the country where you live, that currency will not be accepted for the banks, for deposit, or for exchange, or anything else. So I always advise you to go with some solid currency, preferably American dollars, European euros, or the other currencies that I just mentioned a second ago. I would definitely never go with other currencies from other countries, and in my personal case, I will not take either cryptocurrency. That's my opinion, and that's what I've been doing so far. Now, there's one more issue that is also very important, and this is the form of payment. Domestically, at least in a country like the United States, it's quite easy because I have a lot of options for the clients to pay me that could go all the way from cash to certain electronic forms of payment and the good old paper checks. But sometimes when you are working remotely and your client is abroad, or when you go overseas and you provide the services somewhere else, you're faced with some other situations where it's not just the currency the issue, but it's also the way of payment. Obviously, cash is always possible everywhere, hopefully in one of the currencies that I did mention, but sometimes it's a problem because you have to be transporting the money from another country. You have to declare the amount in customs if it's over the amount limit, which is usually $10,000. And sometimes the cash will not be taken in your own country. It can be also stolen, lost, etc. So that's not a very advisable situation unless it's a very last minute thing and it's a small amount of money. Next, checks. Paper checks are still around, although most clients, at least in my part of the world, are using them less and less. But if the client is going to pay you with a check, make sure that it's a check from a bank that is established in the United States. So it's a bank account that will be responsive to you within the United States or your country if you are watching me from somewhere else. This is very important. Do not take a check from a foreign bank that has no office or branch in the country where you live, unless you are planning on cashing the check before leaving the country where you provided the job. But if it's something that you did remotely and they are going to mail you a check from another country, that should always be a no-no. Do not accept that. Again, this problem is every day smaller and smaller because people are not using paper checks any longer. That leaves us with the main things. Domestically, the main ways to get paid in the United States are, of course, the direct deposit for a client that is a client well established and you constantly provide services to that client. It might be a good idea for you to provide your bank account information to them so that they can just pay you through direct deposit. That's easy, doesn't cost you any money, and is one of the fastest ways to get paid. The other one that I use in the United States when the amount of money is smaller or the client is not a well-established client is that I ask them to pay me by Zelle, Z-E-L-L-E. I know Zelle is not available in most countries, but in the United States it's a great way to do it. Most well-established banks in the US work with Zelle, and you get the money instantly into your checking account, your savings account, whatever bank account you may have. Those are the best ways, the direct deposit and Zelle, to get money right away from a domestic client. When it is not a domestic client and the money is coming from another country in US dollars or in one of the other currencies that I just mentioned, To me, the best possible way is to do what is called a bank transfer. A bank transfer is when a foreign bank pays you by sending the money through an electronic transfer to your bank in your home country, in my case, the United States, and then they will make just a transaction and the money will be deposited in your bank account in your own country. However, sometimes this has some fees. There are service fees that sometimes are charged to you as the one that is getting paid, and most times are charged to the one sending you the transfer. If it's to them and it's their choice to pay you by a transfer, just don't let them to take that money off the money that they are paying you. On the other hand, if it is you who is going to have to pay the fee with your bank, make sure that you charge that extra amount of money to the client so that you still get paid your full fee and or reimburse the full amount of your expenses. This is very important. Keep always this in mind. Another way that is also practical to get paid domestically or from overseas is Wise. Wise is another platform that you can use in most of the main currencies, and also the money goes straight to your bank account. Unlike Zelle, Wise is well known in some other countries, so your client abroad might be familiar with Wise even if they don't have Zelle or they've never heard of it before. So Wise is also an advisable way to get paid. I particularly prefer with my foreign clients the bank transfer, but if this is not possible or they don't want to spend that money, then I can always accept Wise because it's a reliable way to get paid. Now, with this said, there are certain forms of payment that other colleagues accept but that I don't accept because my experience has not been very good. And these are concretely PayPal. I don't like PayPal because with PayPal sometimes they withhold your money for a long time, and it doesn't do any good to be paid if you cannot touch your money for 60 or 90 days. I avoid PayPal. I don't like it, even though it takes foreign currency also. I rather not use it. And the other one is Venmo. My experience with Venmo has been terrible. I don't like their customer service. I don't like to use them, and I know they're somehow linked to the former one that I mentioned. So these are two that I would always stay away from. But there's another option that sometimes the client offers, and it's also acceptable, and I take it and there's no problem. It's not my choice because it's a little bit more convoluted for my accountant because it's not a way that I use all the time. But when the client offers to pay you through Apple Pay, that's another option that is also feasible, and I also take it. I'd rather have Apple Pay than getting paid by credit card, because with credit cards there's usually fees and there's usually an exchange rate that kills you when when the payment is coming from a foreign country. But of course, getting paid through Visa, American Express, or MasterCard is better than not being paid at all. These are the different ways to get paid. These are the currencies, and this is the policy that I follow, my friends, and so far it works okay. I hope you choose one way of payment for domestic jobs and for overseas services that satisfies you and that is going to work out for you. But please always remember that I gave you just my opinion. Consult your attorney, consult your accountant, your tax advisor, because we don't want you working illegally where you cannot do it. We don't want you incurring in all kinds of tax liability when you don't have to. And we don't want you to be using a platform not available in your country or currency that will not be accepted by your institution in the country where you live. But always pay attention to all these things. Make sure that you are getting paid, that you're getting paid what you deserve. But it's not just what you get paid. It's not just how quickly you get paid. It's also sometimes the way that you get paid. So please try to keep an eye on that. And I hope that this experience of mine has been useful to you. This is how I do it, and please try to do it your way, but at least now you know that this is my opinion. Thank you very much.